The wind howled across the arid plains of late Cretaceous North America, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant water. Above, the sky stretched vast and unbroken until a shadow darker than storm clouds swept over the land. Quetzalcoatlus. With a wingspan of 11 meters, it blotted out the sun as it glided on the thermals, its hollow bones making it a master of the air. Below, titanosaurs paused in their grazing, their massive bodies tensing as the shadow passed. Even the towering herbivores, larger than any creature that would walk the earth again, knew the terror of the sky demon. The azhdarchid banked, its spear-like beak glinting in the harsh sunlight. A crest crowned its skull. Some scientists would later argue it was for display, others for thermoregulation, or even amplifying sound. But here, in this moment, it was simply a weapon of intimidation, a crown for the undisputed ruler of the skies. Quetzalcoatlus tilted its wings, descending toward a seasonal river where carcasses of smaller dinosaurs lay scattered. Debate would rage for decades. Was it a scavenger, a predator, or a fisher? Here, it did not care for theories. It fed. Its landing was a spectacle of raw power. Some researchers would insist it needed a running start, like an albatross. Others claimed it launched from cliffs, riding the updrafts. But in this ancient world, it simply was. Its wings folding like a storm receding, its giraffe-like height casting a long, jagged shadow. The titanosaurs bellowed, a sound that shook the earth. But Quetzalcoatlus paid them no mind. It was not of their world. It belonged to the sky. And yet, even kings fall. Far beyond the horizon, beyond the knowledge of the creatures below, an asteroid hurtled through the void. Soon, the skies would darken not with wings, but with ash. Soon, the last of the sky demons would vanish into the sunset, leaving only bones to whisper their story. But for now, Quetzalcoatlus reigned. The sheer scale of Quetzalcoatlus North America defied belief. Standing taller than a giraffe, its long, stilt-like legs lifted its body high above the scrublands of late Cretaceous Texas. Its wings, when fully extended, spanned 11 meters, enough to cast a shadow that sent smaller creatures fleeing in primal terror. Yet the most astonishing feature lay hidden beneath its leathery hide, hollow bones, delicate as bird skeletons, but reinforced with internal struts. A marvel of evolutionary engineering. These air-filled structures made flight possible for a creature that, by all logic, should have been grounded by its own mass. Paleontologists still argued over how it took to the skies. It couldn't have run fast enough to launch like an albatross, insisted Dr. Elena Vasquez, gesturing to a skeletal reconstruction in her lab. The energy required would be unsustainable. It must have used cliffs, thermal updrafts to carry it aloft. Her colleague, Dr. Mark Harris, shook his head. No cliffs in the Hell Creek Formation. It had to be a running start, maybe a hop, then a powerful downstroke. Think of it like a pterosaurian pole vaulter. The debate raged on, but one thing was certain. Once airborne, Quetzalcoatlus was a master of the skies. Like a condor riding thermals, it could soar for hours with minimal effort, its keen eyes scanning the land below for movement, whether the twitch of a dying hadrosaur or the glint of fish in a shallow river. Its spear-like beak, lined with sharp ridges, was another point of contention. Some scientists believed it speared prey like a heron. Others argued it scavenged, tearing into carcasses with ruthless efficiency. The crest atop its skull only deepened the mystery. Was it for display, temperature regulation, or amplifying low-frequency calls across the vast plains? The 1971 discovery in Texas had been a revelation. Fossilized fragments, initially misclassified, were later pieced together into the largest flying creature ever known. Then came Q. lawsoni, a slightly smaller but equally formidable relative, adding fuel to the debates about behavior and ecology. In life, Quetzalcoatlus was a paradox, a creature of impossible size, yet graceful in flight, a predator or scavenger, yet unchallenged in its domain. It shared its world with titanosaurs that shook the earth and theropods that stalked the shadows, but none ruled the skies as it did, and none would witness its fall. Far above, beyond the reach of even Quetzalcoatlus, the asteroid drew nearer. Soon, the skies it once commanded would choke with ash, and the last of its kind would vanish into the dying light. But for now, it soared, a titan of the heavens, defying gravity, defying time. The beak of Quetzalcoatlus was a weapon honed by evolution, a spear of keratin and bone, sharp enough to pierce flesh or strip meat from carcasses with surgical precision. Up close, its surface was ridged, not unlike the serrated edge of a hunting knife, a detail preserved in rare, fossilized fragments. "This wasn't just for show," Dr. Vasquez murmured, running a finger along a 3D printed replica in her lab. "Look at the wear patterns, consistent with repeated impact, whether it was stabbing prey or scavenging. This beak was built for force." Beside her, Dr. Harris adjusted his glasses, skeptical. "Or it could have been a fishing tool. Imagine it skimming shallow waters, spearing fish like a heron. The crest might have even helped stabilize its head during strikes." The crest, another enigma. Rising from the skull like a jagged crown, its purpose remained hotly debated. Some argued it was a display structure, vibrant in life to attract mates or intimidate rivals. Others proposed it regulated body temperature, its thin membranes dissipating heat under the scorching Cretaceous sun. A fringe theory even suggested it amplified sound, turning the creature's calls into deep, resonant booms that carried for miles across the open plains. A CT scan of a fossilized crest fragment revealed a labyrinth of air pockets, evidence that it was lightweight yet structurally reinforced, a delicate balance between function and spectacle. "Maybe it was all three," mused Vasquez. "Evolution doesn't pick just one solution." Outside the lab, the world Quetzalcoatlus once ruled had been harsh but abundant. Seasonal rivers carved through arid landscapes, drawing herds of titanosaurs and theropods to their banks. From above, the azhdarchid would have seen it all: the lumbering giants, the predators lying in wait, the fleeting movements of smaller creatures. Its hunting strategy was as debated as its anatomy. Some reconstructions showed it striding through shallow waters, snatching fish with lightning speed. Others depicted it as a scavenger, descending upon the kills of tyrannosaurs and driving them off with its sheer size. A few even speculated it hunted juvenile dinosaurs, plucking them from the ground like an eagle seizing hares. "The truth?" Harris shrugged. "It probably did whatever it needed to survive. Opportunists don't follow rules." The 1971 Texas discovery had been a puzzle from the start. Fragments initially mistaken for a theropod's bones were later recognized as belonging to something far stranger, a flying giant. Then came the Lawson specimen, Q. lawsoni, confirming these creatures weren't isolated anomalies, but part of a diverse lineage. Yet for all their size and power, their reign was finite. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the asteroid's approach was a silent countdown. Soon, the skies Quetzalcoatlus mastered would turn to fire, then to ash. Its final moments would be spent in a world choking on its own demise, the last of its kind vanishing beneath a shroud of dust. But in the golden light of a setting sun, with its wings outstretched and crest silhouetted against the sky, it was still a king, a phantom of the air, a giant whose bones would outlast its name. The wind screamed across the chalky cliffs of Late Cretaceous Texas as Quetzalcoatlus prepared for flight. Its wings, vast as ship sails, trembled with anticipation. The debate that would consume scientists for decades was irrelevant here. This was survival, pure and instinctual. Below, the land stretched barren, dotted with the skeletal remains of drought-stricken shrubs. A seasonal river glinted in the distance, a lifeline for titanosaurs and theropods alike. But the azhdarchid's world was the sky, and the sky demanded sacrifice. Running or falling. In a lab half a world away, Dr. Elena Vasquez adjusted the holographic projection of a Quetzalcoatlus skeleton. The creature's elongated limbs and reinforced shoulder girdle glowed in the dim light. "Cliff-assisted launch," she insisted. "Look at the muscle attachment points. Its forelimbs were stronger than its legs. It couldn't have generated enough speed on flat ground. It needed height, an updraft." Dr. Mark Harris scoffed, tapping the simulation controls. The hologram shifted, showing the creature crouched on all fours, wings folded like a bat. "Wrong. It used a quadrupedal leap. Think of a vampire bat, but scaled up. A few powerful strides, then, bam! It's airborne." The debate was more than academic. It was about understanding the limits of physics, the defiance of scale. The moment of truth. Back on the cliffs, the real Quetzalcoatlus made its choice. It did not run. Instead, it stepped to the edge, where the wind howled upward in violent spirals. With a shuddering inhale, it spread its wings and dropped. For a heartbeat, it plummeted, a titan surrendering to gravity. Then the wind caught it. The updraft roared against its wings, lifting it with terrifying force. Its hollow bones, lighter than they had any right to be, sang under the strain. One powerful downstroke, then another, and it was soaring, rising above the cliffs like a spectre escaping the earth. Thermal mastery. Once aloft, it barely needed to flap. Like a condor, it rode the thermals, circling higher and higher until the land below became a patchwork of shadows and light. From this height, it could see herds of Alamosaurus trudging through the dust, their long necks swaying like ship masts in a calm sea. A pack of Tyrannosaurus lurked near a carcass, their growls lost in the wind. Quetzalcoatlus did not descend. Not yet. The energy cost of flight was immense, and every movement was calculated. It would wait, patient as the desert, until opportunity called. The unanswered question. In the lab, Vasquez and Harris stared at the hologram, now frozen mid-launch. "We're both wrong," Vasquez admitted quietly. "It didn't just use cliffs or running starts. It used whatever it had. Cliffs, slopes, even riverbanks. Evolution doesn't care about our neat categories." Harris nodded. "A creature this size, it would have taken every advantage it could get." Outside, the wind howled, a ghost of the same currents that once carried giants. And somewhere in the fossil record, the truth waited, buried in stone. The sky belonged to Quetzalcoatlus. Thermal currents rippled through the late Cretaceous air, invisible highways that the azhdarchid navigated with effortless precision. Below, the land baked under the relentless sun, cracked riverbeds, dust-choked plains, and the occasional grove of hardy conifers. But up here, where the wind sang through hollow bones, the world was limitless. The art of soaring. Like modern condors, Quetzalcoatlus was a master of energy conservation. Its wings, spanning 11 meters, caught rising columns of warm air with minimal effort. A single thermal could carry it for miles, its body adjusting instinctively to subtle shifts in pressure. Scientists would later debate whether it relied on visual cues, the shimmer of heat off rocks, the circling of other scavengers, or some deeper, primal sense to find these invisible updrafts. In the present, Dr. Elena Vasquez traced flight paths on a digital map, her fingers darting between reconstructed wind patterns and fossil sites. "It wasn't just about size," she murmured. "It was about efficiency. Every flap cost energy, but riding thermals, that was free fuel." Asterisk. Beside her, Dr. Mark Harris frowned at a skeletal model. "But thermals are unpredictable. What if it got caught in a downdraft?" Vasquez smirked. "Then it adapted. Like any apex predator, it knew when to fight the wind and when to surrender to it. The silent hunt." From its vantage, Quetzalcoatlus watched the world below with cold, calculating eyes. A herd of Alamosaurus trudged along a dry riverbed, their footsteps sending tremors through the earth. A pack of dromaeosaurs lurked in the scrub, waiting for an opportunity to strike. But the azhdarchid wasn't interested in the living. Not yet. A flicker of movement near a sun-bleached carcass caught its attention. A Tyrannosaurus. Its muzzle, streaked with gore, tore into the remains. Quetzalcoatlus tilted its wings, descending in a slow, spiraling glide. The debate over its feeding habits would rage for decades. Scavenger or predator? Fisher or opportunist? Here, in this moment, the answer was simple. It was whatever the land demanded. The Tyrannosaurus snarled as the shadow passed overhead, but Quetzalcoatlus ignored it. With a single precise strike, its beak plunged into the carcass, tearing free a strip of flesh. The theropod lunged, but the azhdarchid was already aloft, its wings beating once, twice, before catching another thermal. The limits of flight. Back in the lab, Harris adjusted a pressure simulation, watching as digital muscles strained under the stress of takeoff. Even with thermals, the energy cost was insane. It couldn't have flown for long without rest. Vasquez nodded. Which is why it had to be strategic. Short bursts, long glides, feast or famine. A fossilized Quetzalcoatlus wingbone sat between them, its hollow interior visible through a CT scan. The structure was a marvel, lightweight yet reinforced, a perfect balance between strength and weight. But it had its limits. "One bad landing," Harris muttered. And it was over. A fracture, a torn ligament, no second chances at this size. The last flight. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the asteroid drew closer. Quetzalcoatlus didn't know this, of course. It knew only the wind, the sun, the rhythm of survival. For now, it soared, a silhouette against the fading light, its crest cutting through the sky like a blade. Soon, the thermals would vanish, choked by ash and fire. Soon, the last of its kind would spiral earthward, wings too heavy with dust to catch the wind. But for now, it ruled the heavens, and the sky, for all its vastness, belonged to it alone. The debate had raged for decades, in hushed lecture halls and heated academic journals. What did Quetzalcoatlus eat? Beneath the scorching Cretaceous sun, the answer was written in blood and bone. A carcass lay half submerged in a drying riverbed, a juvenile Alamosaurus, its ribs cracked open by scavengers. The stench of decay hung thick in the air, drawing a circling shadow from above. Quetzalcoatlus descended, its wings folding like a storm retreating. At close range, its true size was staggering, taller than the surrounding cycads, its beak a serrated blade longer than a man's arm. Scavenger or predator? In a modern lab, Dr. Elena Vasquez held up a fossilized Quetzalcoatlus beak fragment, its edges worn smooth. "See these microfractures? Consistent with bone impact. This wasn't just scavenging, this was active hunting." Dr. Mark Harris leaned over the specimen, skeptical. "Or it was crushing carcasses already broken by theropods. Look at the wear patterns. They match scavenging birds like vultures." The argument mirrored the scene unfolding 70 million years prior. The azhdarchid paced around the dead titanosaur, its movements deliberate. A pack of dromaeosaurs hissed from the tree line but kept their distance. Even predators knew better than to challenge the sky demon. With a sudden strike, Quetzalcoatlus drove its beak into the carcass, twisting to tear free a strip of flesh. The motion was fluid, practiced, the act of a creature familiar with death. Fisher or land hunter? The beak shape suggests piscivory, Harris insisted, tapping a 3D model of the azhdarchid's skull. Long, narrow, perfect for spearing fish in shallow waters. Vasquez countered. Then why are most fossils found inland? No, this was a terrestrial hunter. It stalked juvenile dinosaurs like a stork hunting rodents. Back in the Cretaceous, the truth was messy. After gorging on the carcass, Quetzalcoatlus waded into the river shallows, its gaze fixed on the darting shadows of fish. In one lightning motion, its beak plunged beneath the surface, emerging with a thrashing gar clamped in its jaws. Opportunist, generalist, survivor. The unanswered question. The debate would never be settled. Fossilized stomach contents were vanishingly rare, and behavior didn't fossilize. It was whatever it needed to be, Vasquez finally conceded, staring at the reconstructed skeleton looming over the lab. In a world this harsh, specialization was a death sentence. Outside, the wind howled, a ghost of the same air currents that once carried a hunter whose diet defied categories. And high above the ancient river, Quetzalcoatlus took flight, its wings swallowing the sun as it ascended into the hungry sky. The Texas sun beat down on the Javelina Formation, baking the cracked earth into a mosaic of dust and stone. Douglas Lawson wiped sweat from his brow, his boots kicking up small clouds of sediment as he scanned the ground. The graduate student had spent weeks in this wasteland, following rumors of strange bones protruding from the Badlands. Then he saw it, a fragment of something impossibly large, not the familiar curve of a theropod's rib, not the thick limb of a titanosaur. This was slender, hollow, delicate, despite its size. Lawson crouched, brushing away the dirt with careful fingers. The fossilized bone gleamed in the sunlight, its surface etched with the fine striations of a creature built for flight. But nothing that flew should have been this big. A puzzle in the dust. Back at the dig site, Lawson's team gathered around the find, their voices hushed. Pterosaur, one researcher ventured, squinting at the fragment. Too large, Lawson muttered. Nothing like this has ever been recorded. The debate began before the bones were fully unearthed. The fragments defied classification. Some features matched pterosaurs. Others suggested a theropod's grace. The sheer scale was the real shock. A single wing phalanx stretched longer than Lawson's forearm. This thing, he whispered, could have blotted out the sun. First impressions, lasting mistakes. Initial reports were cautious, skeptical. The scientific community balked at the idea of a flying creature rivaling small aircraft in size. Some argued the fossils belonged to multiple individuals, a jumbled graveyard rather than a single beast. Others dismissed them as misidentified theropod remains, a trick of erosion and wishful thinking. Lawson knew better. As more bones emerged, a slender femur, a section of beak-like jaw, the truth became undeniable. This was something new, something impossible. The naming of a titan. Months later, in the hushed halls of the University of Texas, Lawson stared at the reconstructed fragments. The creature's silhouette was monstrous, its wingspan stretching across the lab like a spectre from another age. Quetzalcoatlus, he murmured, naming it for the Aztec feathered serpent god. The title fit. This was no mere reptile. It was a deity of the skies. But the debates had only just begun. Was it a dedicated scavenger, a predator, or something in between? How did it fly? Did it stalk inland rivers or soar over open plains? The answers were buried in stone, waiting. And far beyond the lab's fluorescent lights, in the quiet of the Javelina Formation, the wind whispered through the rocks, a ghost of the same currents that once carried a giant. The significance of Lawson's find didn't just rewrite textbooks, it shattered them. In the months following the excavation, paleontologists from across the globe descended upon the University of Texas, drawn by whispers of a creature that defied logic. The reconstructed bones, laid out with painstaking precision, told a story of impossible scale. A wingspan stretching 11 meters, a height rivaling giraffes, a beak built for piercing flesh or stripping carcasses clean. A giant among giants. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore, a renowned pterosaur specialist, adjusted her glasses as she circled the skeletal display. This isn't just a larger pteranodon, she said, voice hushed. The proportions are all wrong. The neck, the limbs. This thing was built differently, built bigger. The implications were staggering. Previous estimates had placed the upper limit of flying animals at half this size. Quetzalcoatlus northropii, named for both the Aztec god and aviation pioneer John Knudsen Northrop, laughed in the face of those limits. The flight debate ignites. Across the lab, a heated discussion erupted. It couldn't have taken off from flat ground, argued Dr. Carl Mercer, jabbing a finger at the elongated forelimbs. The energy required would have been unsustainable. It had to launch from cliffs. Dr. Lisa Nguyen shook her head. The Hell Creek Formation wasn't a cliff-dominated environment. Look at the hind limbs. They're robust. It could have used a running start, like an albatross. A third voice cut in. Or it vaulted into the air with its wings, suggested Dr. Raj Patel, miming a quadrupedal leap. Bats do it. Why not this? The debate raged, but one thing was clear. Quetzalcoatlus had flown. The hollow bones, the reinforced shoulder girdle, the sheer aerodynamic efficiency of its form, all pointed to a creature that ruled the skies. The crest conundrum. Then there was the crest. The fragmentary skull pieces suggested a structure unlike anything seen before, a jagged blade-like projection that arced backward from the skull. Whitmore traced its outline on a reconstruction sketch. Display, she mused. Thermoregulation, or something else entirely? Patel leaned in. What if it was acoustic, a resonance chamber? Imagine the sound this thing could make. Low-frequency booms to communicate across miles. The room fell silent as the image took hold. A Quetzalcoatlus, soaring over the Cretaceous plains, its calls vibrating through the air like thunder. The legacy of the Lawson specimen. As the years passed, more fossils emerged, smaller relatives like Q. lawsoni, fragmentary remains from other sites, but none matched the sheer grandeur of the original find. The 1971 discovery had opened a door, revealing a world where flying creatures reached sizes once deemed impossible. Yet, for all the answers it provided, Quetzalcoatlus left behind just as many questions. How did it feed? Did it hunt, scavenge, or fish? How did it interact with the titanosaurs and theropods that shared its world? The rocks held their secrets close. The final flight. Somewhere beyond the lab's sterile lights, beyond the debates and the diagrams, the last Quetzalcoatlus had taken to the skies one final time. It hadn't known it was the last, of course. It had simply lived, had soared on thermals, had fed when hungry, had ruled a world that would soon vanish in fire and ash. But in the quiet of the fossil lab, as scientists pored over its bones, the creature lived again. Not as a myth, not as a monster, but as a king. The wind howled across the badlands of Big Bend National Park, carrying with it the scent of ancient stone and dry earth. Douglas Lawson knelt in the dust, his fingers brushing against another fragment of bone, this one smaller than the first, but no less significant. Q. Lawsoni. The creature that would bear his name was a sleeker cousin to the titanic Quetzalcoatlus North America, its wingspan a mere 9 meters instead of 11, but what it lacked in size, it made up for in mystery. A different kind of giant. In the lab, Dr. Eleanor Whitmore held the 2 fossilized femurs side by side, one from the original Texas giant, the other from the Lawson specimen. "Look at the proportions," she murmured. Q. Lawsoni was lighter, more gracile, built for agility, not sheer dominance. Dr. Raj Patel leaned in, adjusting his glasses. "Ecological niche partitioning," he said. "Same region, same time period, but they weren't competing. Northropi ruled the open plains, Lawsoni hunted the riverbanks. The differences were subtle but telling. Q. Lawsoni's beak was slightly narrower, its crest less pronounced. Its limbs were built for precision, not power. The scavenger's edge. Back in the Cretaceous, the smaller azhdarchid stalked the shallows of a winding river, its shadow flickering over the water's surface. A Dinosaurs lurked nearby, half submerged, but the pterosaur paid it no mind. Its eyes were fixed on the carcass of a hadrosaur, wedged between 2 boulders, a meal too treacherous for most scavengers to reach. With a few careful strides, Q. Lawsoni waded into the water, its beak probing the rotting flesh. The crocodile hissed, but the pterosaur didn't flinch. It was faster, more maneuverable than its larger cousin, better suited for tight spaces and risky meals. In the lab, Whitmore pointed to the Lawson specimen's skeletal reconstruction. "See the wear on the beak tip? Fine striations, like a knife used for filleting. This wasn't a brute force feeder, it was a specialist." The crest's secret. The crest of Q. Lawsoni was another puzzle, where Q. Northropi's was tall and blade-like. This one was shorter, more curved. Patel ran a finger along the 3D printed replica. If Northropi's crest was for display or sound, this one might have been hydrodynamic, reducing drag when it dipped its beak into water. Whitmore raised an eyebrow. Or it was sexual selection. Females preferred males with sleeker crests. We'll never know for sure. The last of their kind. Both species shared the same fate. Somewhere beyond the river, beyond the lab's humming lights, the asteroid drew closer. Soon, the skies would darken, the rivers would boil, and the last of the azhdarchids would vanish into the long night. But for now, Q. Lawsoni fed, its smaller form a testament to evolution's endless experimentation. And in the rocks of Texas, its bones waited, whispering the story of a different kind of giant. The debate began with a single fossil, a fragment of skull unearthed from the Javelina Formation, its surface etched with grooves that defied explanation. Dr. Eleanor Whitmore held the specimen under the lab's harsh lights, her fingers tracing the jagged ridges. "This isn't just a crest," she murmured. "It's a structure." Beside her, Dr. Raj Patel adjusted his glasses, skepticism tightening his jaw. "Or its erosion. 70 million years in the ground does strange things to bone." Whitmore shook her head. "Look at the symmetry, the vascular channels. This was alive. A crown of mystery." The crest of Quetzalcoatlus North America had long been a subject of speculation. Some argued it was a display feature, others a thermal regulator. But this new fragment, with its intricate network of hollows and ridges, suggested something more elaborate. It could have been a resonating chamber, Whitmore said, tapping the fossil. Imagine the sound, low-frequency booms carrying for miles across the plains, a way to communicate or intimidate. Patel scoffed. Or it was just for show. Bright colors, mating displays, like a cassowary's casque. A third voice cut through the tension. Why not both? Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the 3D reconstruction flickering on the lab's main screen. The digital crest spiraled upward like a twisted horn, its surface shimmering with hypothetical keratin sheathing. Evolution doesn't pick one function, she said. It stacks them. Display, thermoregulation, sound amplification. This thing could have done it all. The fossil's testimony. The fragment told a story of extravagance. Under the CT scanner, the bone revealed a honeycomb of air pockets, lightweight yet structurally reinforced, a masterpiece of biomechanical efficiency. No living animal has a crest like this, Whitmore said. Not even close. Patel crossed his arms. Because it's not a crest. It's a sail. Look at the blood vessel channels. This thing was vascularized. It could have flushed with color or dissipated heat like a car radiator. Vasquez zoomed in on the scan. Or it was acoustic. Hollow chambers amplify sound. Modern birds use similar structures to deepen their calls. The room fell silent as the implications settled. A Quetzalcoatlus crest wasn't just ornamentation. It was a tool. The living crown. 70 million years earlier, the crest's true purpose played out under the Cretaceous sun. A male Quetzalcoatlus perched on a sandstone outcrop, his crest catching the light like polished obsidian. As the wind howled through its hollow channels, the structure hummed, a deep, resonant vibration that rolled across the plains. Miles away, another azhdarchid lifted its head, sensing the call. The crest wasn't just for show. It was a beacon, a weapon, a language. The debate. Unresolved. Back in the lab, the scientists stared at the fossil, each seeing a different truth. We'll never know for sure, Patel admitted. Not without a time machine. Whitmore smirked. Then, let's keep looking. Maybe the next fossil will have the answer. Vasquez turned back to the reconstruction, the digital crest glowing like a crown of fire. Somewhere in the rocks, the rest of the story waited, and high above the ancient Badlands, the last Quetzalcoatlus soared, its crest slicing through the sky, a mystery even to itself. The wind howled across the cracked plains of late Cretaceous Texas, carrying with it the scent of dust and the distant promise of rain. This was a land of extremes, scorching days, frigid nights, and rivers that ran dry for months before swelling into torrents, a kingdom of thirst and endurance. And yet, Quetzalcoatlus thrived. From above, the landscape unfolded like a tapestry of survival. Scattered conifers clung to the rocky outcrops, their gnarled roots digging deep into the parched earth. Seasonal riverbeds carved serpentine paths through the plains, their cracked mudflats littered with the bones of creatures that had succumbed to the drought. Masters of the dry sky. The azhdarchid rode the thermals with effortless grace, its 11-meter wingspan casting a fleeting shadow over the land below. Unlike the dense forests of earlier epochs, this open terrain was perfect for a creature of its size. Few obstacles, clear sight lines, and thermal updrafts that rose like invisible pillars from the sun-baked earth. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice echoed through the halls of a modern research facility as she gestured to a climate reconstruction map. This wasn't just luck. Quetzalcoatlus was built for aridity, long legs to wade shallow waters, a beak that could pierce tough hide or pluck fish from dwindling pools. It didn't just live here, it dominated. The scramble for water. Below the soaring giant, the land pulsed with desperation. A herd of Alamosaurus trudged toward a shrinking waterhole, their massive feet kicking up clouds of dust. A pack of Tyrannosaurus lurked at the fringes, their eyes fixed on the weakest of the titanosaurs. But the true ruler of this scene wasn't among them. With a sudden shift in the wind, Quetzalcoatlus descended, its wings folding back as it landed near the water's edge. The theropods snarled but kept their distance. Even apex predators knew better than to challenge the sky demon. The azhdarchid's spear-like beak plunged into the murky water, emerging with a thrashing gar clamped in its jaws. It was an efficient hunter, an opportunistic scavenger, a creature that turned scarcity into advantage. The crest's hidden role. The bony crest, atop its skull, caught the sunlight, its surface shimmering with heat. Dr. Raj Patel's theory flickered to life in the fossil record. It wasn't just for show. Those hollow channels could have dissipated heat like a radiator. In this climate, overheating was a death sentence. Asterisk. Nearby, a smaller Q. lawsoni picked through the carcass of a juvenile hadrosaur, its narrower beak deftly stripping meat from bone. The two species shared the land, but not the same fate. Lawsoni's lighter frame and riverbank habits made it a different kind of survivor. The land's relentless rule. The drought deepened. The waterhole shrank further, its surface thickening with algae. The Alamosaurus moved on, their lumbering footsteps shaking the earth as they sought the next oasis. The Tyrannosaurus followed, their bellies empty and tempers frayed. But Quetzalcoatlus remained. It could soar for miles on a single thermal, its keen eyes scanning for the glint of water or the dark shape of a carcass. When the rivers ran dry, it turned scavenger. When the fish vanished, it hunted smaller dinosaurs or stole from theropods. It was the ultimate generalist in a land that punished specialization. The coming storm. Far beyond the horizon, beyond the knowledge of the creatures below, the asteroid drew nearer. Soon the skies would darken, not with the shadow of wings, but with ash. Soon the rivers would boil, and the last of the azhdarchids would vanish beneath a shroud of dust. But for now, Quetzalcoatlus reigned, a king of the arid kingdom, a phantom of the thirsty wind, and the land, for all its cruelty, belonged to it. The late afternoon sun painted the cracked earth in hues of amber and rust as Quetzalcoatlus surveyed its domain. Below, the seasonal river had dwindled to a series of stagnant pools, their surfaces shimmering with the desperate thrashing of fish. The air smelled of dried mud and sun-bleached bone. A herd of Alamosaurus lumbered along the riverbank, their massive feet sinking into the softening ground. Their long necks swayed like the masts of ships, their hides caked with dust. One juvenile lagged behind, its steps sluggish. Weakness in a land that had no mercy for the frail. The dance of predators. A pair of Tyrannosaurus emerged from the scrub, their nostrils flaring as they caught the scent of vulnerability. They moved with calculated patience, circling the herd, waiting for the moment to strike. But the titanosaurs were not defenseless. The adults formed a rough barrier around the young, their sheer bulk a deterrent. Above, Quetzalcoatlus watched. Its crest cast a jagged shadow across the ground as it banked, riding the thermals with minimal effort. The debate among paleontologists, whether it was a predator, scavenger, or fisher, meant nothing here. It was all three. It was whatever the moment demanded. The opportunist's feast. The Tyrannosaurus lunged. Chaos erupted. The titanosaurs bellowed, their tails swinging like battering rams. One of the theropods darted in, jaws snapping, but the adults held firm. The juvenile stumbled, its leg buckling under the strain of panic. Quetzalcoatlus needed no further invitation. With a few powerful wing beats, it descended, its shadow swallowing the struggling titanosaur. The Tyrannosaurus snarled, but the azhdarchid was already in motion. Its beak struck like a spear, piercing the juvenile's hide with surgical precision. The titanosaur let out a final, shuddering cry before collapsing. The theropods hesitated. This was not a carcass they could claim easily. The scavenger's advantage. Quetzalcoatlus did not linger. It tore free a strip of flesh, gulping it down with a swift jerk of its neck. The Tyrannosaurus growled, inching closer, but the azhdarchid spread its wings, a silent warning. It was not worth the fight. With a final snap of its beak, Quetzalcoatlus launched itself skyward, leaving the theropods to their contested prize. It had taken what it needed. Efficiency was survival. The kingdom's fragile balance. From above, the land revealed its brutal logic. The river's path was littered with the remnants of past droughts, skeletons half buried in sediment, their bones picked clean by scavengers. Quetzalcoatlus soared higher, its keen eyes scanning for the next opportunity. A flicker of movement near a distant pool caught its attention. A Dinosaurs, dragging a hadrosaur carcass into the shallows. The azhdarchid adjusted its course, gliding towards the scene. The scientist's dilemma. In a lab half a world away, Dr. Elena Vasquez studied a 3D model of the Hell Creek ecosystem, her fingers tracing the projected paths of predator and prey. It wasn't just about size, she murmured. It was about intelligence. Quetzalcoatlus didn't waste energy. It watched, it waited, it chose. Asterisk. Beside her, Dr. Mark Harris frowned at a fossilized trackway, a Tyrannosaurus footprint overlapping the delicate impression of a pterosaur's landing. They shared the land, but they weren't equals. The azhdarchid was always one step ahead. Asterisk. The last sunset. The Cretaceous sky burned gold as Quetzalcoatlus circled once more, its wings catching the dying light. The land below was harsh, but it had mastered every cruelty. It did not know of the fire streaking toward Earth. It did not know its reign would end in darkness. For now, it was still the sky demon, and the arid kingdom bowed before it. The wind screamed through the canyons of Late Cretaceous Texas, carrying with it the scent of dust and the distant promise of a storm. Quetzalcoatlus stood at the edge of a sandstone cliff, its wings half spread, the 11-meter span trembling in the updrafts. Below, the debate that would consume scientists for millennia was irrelevant. Here, in this moment, flight was not theory, it was survival. The weight of doubt. In a modern laboratory, Dr. Carl Mercer adjusted the holographic model of Quetzalcoatlus, the skeletal reconstruction glowing in the dim light. His finger traced the creature's massive ribcage, the hollow bones reinforced with intricate struts. "The math doesn't add up," he muttered. At this size, the energy required for sustained flight would be astronomical. It's more plausible it was primarily terrestrial, a stork on steroids, not a sky demon. Across the table, Dr. Lisa Nguyen scoffed, tapping her tablet to overlay muscle attachment points onto the hologram. Then explain the wing structure, the deltoid crests, the reinforced scapula. This wasn't a creature built to walk, it was built to fly. The cliff's edge. Back on the sandstone ledge, Quetzalcoatlus tilted its head, sensing the shift in the wind. Its crest, ridged and hollow, hummed faintly as the air rushed through its chambers. Some scientists would later argue the sound could have been used for communication. Here, it was just noise. With a shuddering inhale, the azhdarchid stepped off the cliff. For a heartbeat, it plummeted, wings folded tight. Then, the updraft caught it. Its wings snapped open, the wind roaring against the leathery membranes. One powerful downstroke, then another, and it was soaring, rising above the canyon walls like a specter escaping the earth. The running start theory. Mercer shook his head at the hologram. Cliffs weren't everywhere. What about inland plains? It had to take off from flat ground sometimes. Nguyen smirked. Then, watch. She switched the simulation. The digital Quetzalcoatlus crouched, wings tucked like a bat's, then lunged forward in a series of bounding strides. On the third leap, its wings unfurled, and with a final, explosive downstroke, it launched into the air. Quadrupedal vaulting, she said. It didn't run, it leaped. Mercer frowned. And if it stumbled, a creature this size wouldn't get a second chance. The thermal advantage. High above the canyon, Quetzalcoatlus circled, riding the rising column of warm air with barely a flap. Its shadow flickered over the scrubland below, where a herd of Alamosaurus trudged through the dust, oblivious. From this height, the land was a patchwork of opportunity, carcasses picked clean by scavengers, the glint of water in a distant riverbed, the slow, vulnerable movements of a juvenile hadrosaur separated from its herd. Quetzalcoatlus didn't dive. Not yet. Flight was costly. Energy was precious. It would wait for the perfect moment. The scientist's concession. Mercer sighed, rubbing his temples. Fine, it flew, but not like anything alive today. Not like birds, not like bats, something else entirely. Nguyen nodded. Something bigger. Outside the lab, the wind howled, a ghost of the same currents that once carried giants, and somewhere in the fossil record, the truth waited, buried in stone. The wind tunnel hummed to life, its industrial roar drowning out all other sounds as the scaled-down Quetzalcoatlus model was subjected to simulated Cretaceous skies. Dr. Lisa Nguyen adjusted the airflow parameters, her eyes fixed on the delicate sensors tracking lift, drag, and stability. At 40% wind speed, we're seeing near-perfect glide efficiency. She called over the noise, pointing to the data flickering across the monitors. But watch what happens when we simulate takeoff thrust. Asterisk. The model's wings snapped forward in a powerful downstroke, the motion captured in slow motion by high-speed cameras. For a fraction of a second, the entire structure shuddered, then stabilized as the artificial thermals caught beneath its wings. The biomechanical breakthrough. Across the lab, Dr. Carl Mercer scrutinized the 3D simulation on his workstation. The digital Quetzalcoatlus crouched on all fours, its wing joints pulsing with reconstructed muscle mass. The quadrupedal launch works, he admitted grudgingly, but only if it had a 15-degree slope. Flat ground would require impossible energy expenditure. Nguyen killed the wind tunnel and pulled up a topographic map of the Hell Creek Formation, which explains why we find most fossils near ancient river valleys, not cliffs, but natural ramps, perfect for running starts. The data painted a new picture. Quetzalcoatlus, as an opportunistic launcher, using any available incline, riverbanks, dunes, even the backs of sleeping titanosaurs, to gain the momentum needed for flight. The thermal soaring enigma. The real revelation came from the thermal simulations. When Nguyen input late Cretaceous atmospheric conditions, the model's flight endurance tripled. It wasn't just flapping, she breathed. watching the digital azhdarchid circle for hours without a single wing beat. It was a master of energy conservation. Ride a thermal up, glide down to the next one, repeat. Like a prehistoric glider, Mercer zoomed in on the wing structure. These leading-edge ridges, they're not just for strength, they're vortex generators, stabilized airflow at low speeds. The fossil evidence. A knock interrupted them. Dr. Elena Vasquez entered, cradling a plaster-jacketed fossil. You need to see this. Inside the protective casing lay a near-perfect Quetzalcoatlus wing finger bone, the fourth phalanx. What made it extraordinary were the microscopic wear patterns along its surface. These striations. Vasquez pointed to parallel grooves under the microscope, consistent with repetitive high-stress flexion. This creature didn't just glide, it performed powerful takeoff strokes regularly. The Cretaceous reality. 70 million years earlier, the debate would have been meaningless. A Quetzalcoatlus stood at the edge of a dried-up oxbow lake, its wings twitching in anticipation. The cracked mud formed a natural ramp, not a cliff, but enough. It charged. 3 bounding strides, wings pumping like pistons. Then, air! The downstroke thundered against the ground, kicking up dust as the azhdarchid vaulted skyward. 1 stroke, 2, and it was aloft, catching the first thermal with practiced ease. The unanswered questions. Back in the lab, the scientists stared at their conflicting data. We're both right, Mercer conceded. Cliff launches when available, running starts when not, thermal, soaring whenever possible. Nguyen nodded. Evolution doesn't care about elegant theories, only what works. Vasquez gently closed the fossil case. 1 mystery solved, 100 more to go. Outside, the wind picked up, the same invisible force that once carried giants, and high above the ancient floodplains, Quetzalcoatlus banked into the sunset, its flight path a question mark written across the sky. The wind was a living thing, howling through the canyons, screaming across the arid plains, carrying the scent of dust and distant water. Quetzalcoatlus rode it effortlessly, its 11-meter wingspan stretched taut against the sky. Below, the land was a patchwork of struggle, titanosaurs lumbering through cracked riverbeds, theropods stalking the shadows, all dwarfed by the shadow that passed overhead. This was its kingdom. A hunter's eyes. From this height, the world unfolded with crystalline clarity. A herd of Alamosaurus trudged toward a shrinking waterhole, their massive feet kicking up clouds of sediment. A pack of Tyrannosaurus lurked at the fringes, their yellowed eyes fixed on the weakest of the herd. But Quetzalcoatlus was not interested in the living, not yet. Its gaze locked onto a dark shape near the water's edge, a hadrosaur carcass, half submerged and ripe with decay. The theropods had already torn into it, but they had missed the richest prize, the marrow-rich bones, cracked open by scavengers and left exposed to the sun. The descent. With a tilt of its wings, Quetzalcoatlus spiraled downward, the wind shrieking through its hollow crest. Scientists would later debate whether that crest amplified sound, regulated heat, or served as a display, but here it was simply a blade cutting through the air. The Tyrannosaurus snarled as the shadow engulfed them, their hunched forms bristling with instinctive fury. But the azhdarchid did not slow. Its landing was a controlled crash, wings snapping back, stilt-like legs absorbing the impact with a force that sent tremors through the earth. The theropods hesitated. The feast. Quetzalcoatlus struck. Its beak, long as a man's arm, serrated like a saw, plunged into the carcass, twisting to wrench free a splintered femur. The bone shattered in its grip, and with a flick of its neck, it swallowed the fragments whole. The Tyrannosaurus growled, inching closer, but the azhdarchid spread its wings, a silent warning. This was not a fight worth having. The science of dominance. In a lab half a world away, Dr. Elena Vasquez studied the stress fractures on a fossilized Quetzalcoatlus beak. This wasn't just scavenging, she murmured. This was bone-crushing power. It didn't just steal kills, it took them. Beside her, Dr. Mark Harris adjusted a 3D flight simulation. The digital azhdarchid banked sharply, its wings catching an updraft. Imagine the intimidation factor, he said. A creature this size, landing in the middle of a T-Rex feeding frenzy, it didn't need to fight. Its presence was enough. The last patrol. Back in the Cretaceous, the feast ended as quickly as it began. Quetzalcoatlus launched itself skyward with 3 thunderous wing beats, leaving the theropods to their stripped prize. The thermal carried it high above the plains, where the air was thin and the world stretched endlessly in every direction. To the west, storm clouds gathered. To the east, a river glinted like a silver thread. And somewhere beyond the horizon, unseen, unknown, a fireball streaked through the void. But, for now, the sky was still its own. The demon's legacy. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain. Quetzalcoatlus banked towards the storm, its crest slicing through the gathering dark. Below, the titanosaurs bellowed, their calls shaking the earth. They did not know they were doomed. Neither did the sky demon. And so it flew, unaware that its reign, like the storm clouds, was fleeting, unaware that its bones would one day lie buried in stone, whispering its story to creatures yet unborn. For now, it was still a king. For now, the wind still answered. The sky burned, not with the familiar gold of sunset, but with a sickly, sulphurous hue that stained the horizon like a bruise. Quetzalcoatlus circled high above the plains, its wings catching the last warm currents before the world turned cold. Below, the land was restless. Titanosaurs bellowed uneasily, their massive feet churning the dry earth as they moved in aimless herds. The rivers had turned sluggish, their surfaces choked with ash. Something was wrong. The changing winds. For days, the air had tasted metallic, the wind carrying whispers of distant fire. The great azhdarchid had never known fear, but now its instinct screamed, not at the scent of predators, but at the sky itself. The thermals were dying. Without them, flight became laborious, each wing beat heavier than the last. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice echoed through the halls of a modern research facility as she gestured to climate models of the KPG boundary layer. The asteroid impact would have thrown billions of tons of debris into the atmosphere. Global temperatures plummeted within days. For a creature reliant on thermals, it was a death sentence. The scramble for survival. Below, the rivers reeked of rotting fish. Quetzalcoatlus descended toward a stagnant pool, its shadow scattering a pack of dromaeosaurs from their half-eaten meal. The water was thick with silt, the fish bloated and lifeless. Still, it fed, gulping down the rancid flesh with mechanical efficiency. Survival, not preference, dictated its actions now. A tyrannosaurus lurked nearby, its ribs stark against its scaled hide. Hunger had made it bold. It snarled as the azhdarchid landed, but Quetzalcoatlus didn't retreat. It spread its wings wide, crest flaring, a last defiant display of dominance. The theropod hesitated, then slunk away. Even kings could starve. The last flights. The ash fell like snow. At first, it was only a haze, a faint grit in the wind, but soon the particles thickened, coating the land in a grey shroud. Quetzalcoatlus took to the skies less often now. Each launch was a struggle. Its wings, fighting against air, turned sluggish with dust. Dr. Mark Harris adjusted a flight simulation in his lab, the digital azhdarchid's movements growing erratic as he inputted the atmospheric changes. With reduced solar radiation, thermal production would have dropped by 70%. They couldn't soar anymore, couldn't hunt, couldn't escape. The final choice. On the cracked mudflats of a dying river, Quetzalcoatlus stood motionless, its wings folded tight. The ash coated its crest, dulling its once vibrant sheen. In the distance, the titanosaurs bellowed, not in challenge, but in confusion. The world they knew was unraveling. The azhdarchid tilted its head skyward, as if searching for a thermal that no longer existed. Then, with a shuddering effort, it spread its wings and ran, not towards the cliffs, not towards the wind, but straight into the gathering dark. Its last flight was short. Its shadow, once vast enough to blot out the sun, vanished into the falling ash. The long night. The asteroid's impact was still hours away, but the world was already ending. In the lab, Vasquez stared at the fossilized remains of a Quetzalcoatlus wing bone, the final fragment of a creature that had ruled the skies for millions of years. They didn't die from the fire. They died from the silence. No wind, no thermals, just stillness. Outside, the wind howled, a ghost of the currents that had once carried giants. And somewhere in the stone, the last sky demon slept. The world was ending in slow motion. Ash fell in ceaseless curtains, turning the late afternoon sun into a dim red ember. Quetzalcoatlus perched on a sandstone outcrop, its wings folded tight against the toxic rain. The great azhdarchid had survived droughts, storms, and the relentless competition of the Cretaceous. But this was different. The very air had turned against it. Below, the land was a graveyard in the making. A herd of Alamosaurus lay collapsed in the riverbed, their massive bodies half submerged in water gone thick with silt. The Tyrannosaurus that had once ruled these plains staggered like drunkards, their ribs protruding through sagging skin. Even the insects had fallen silent. The sky demon's last hunt. Hunger drove the azhdarchid into the air one final time. Its launch was labored, wings beating against the ash-clogged wind. The thermals it had relied on for millions of years were gone, replaced by a suffocating haze. Each flap cost precious energy, but the alternative was starvation. A flicker of movement near a drying pool caught its eye. A Dinosaurs, sluggish with cold, its jaws clamped around the rotting remains of a hadrosaur. Quetzalcoatlus tilted its wings, descending in a spiraling glide. The crocodilian hissed, but its movements were slow, its reflexes dulled by the creeping chill. The azhdarchid struck like a spear, its beak piercing the crocodile's eye with surgical precision. The Dinosaurs thrashed once, then stilled. It was a meager victory. The meat was tainted, the taste of decay thick on its tongue, but Quetzalcoatlus ate anyway. Survival had no room for pride. The scientists' reconstruction. 70 million years later, Dr. Elena Vasquez studied a thin layer of sediment under a microscope, the KPG boundary, a line of death etched in stone. The ash fall would have coated everything, she murmured. No sunlight for photosynthesis, no plants, no herbivores, and then no predators. Beside her, Dr. Mark Harris adjusted a climate model, the screen displaying plummeting global temperatures. The Quetzalcoatlus didn't stand a chance. No thermals meant no soaring. No soaring meant no hunting. They starved long before the cold could finish them. The final flight. The ash grew thicker. Quetzalcoatlus lifted its head, beak parted as if tasting the wind, but there was no wind left to taste. Only stillness, only silence. With a shuddering effort, it spread its wings and leapt from the outcrop. This time the air did not answer. It flapped once, twice, muscles burning, lungs straining, but the sky, its kingdom, had become a prison. Its wings, once vast enough to blot out the sun, were now anchors dragging it down. The ground rushed up to meet it, the last shadow. In the gathering dark, the azhdarchid's body lay broken among the bones of the world it had once ruled. The ash fell gently, covering its crest, its wings, the spear-like beak that had inspired both terror and awe. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the asteroid's impact sent shockwaves rippling across the planet. Firestorms raged. The seas boiled. But here, in this quiet corner of Hell Creek, the end came softly. The legacy in stone. Vasquez closed the microscope's lens, her fingers brushing the fossilized wing fragment on her desk. They lasted longer than most, she said quietly. But in the end, even kings fall. Outside the lab, the wind stirred, a fleeting breath, a whisper of the currents that had once carried giants. And in the rocks of Texas, the last Quetzalcoatlus slept, its bones a monument to the sky it had ruled. The desert wind whispered through the canyons of Big Bend National Park, carrying with it the ghosts of giants. 70 million years after the last Quetzalcoatlus vanished beneath the ash, its bones still spoke, not in roars or wing beats, but in the quiet language of stone. Dr. Elena Vasquez knelt in the dust, her fingers tracing the edge of a freshly exposed fossil. The fragment, a slender, hollow bone no wider than her thumb, belonged to something far grander. "Another one," she murmured, brushing away the sediment. "Smaller than Northropi, but the structure is all wrong for Lawsoni." Her colleague, Dr. Raj Patel, adjusted his sunglasses against the glare. "Third specimen this season. If this keeps up, we'll need a new classification. A giant's echo." The discovery was part of a growing pattern. Over the past decade, fragmentary remains had surfaced across Texas, New Mexico, even as far as Morocco. Hints of azhdarchids that pushed the boundaries of what scientists thought possible. Some fragments suggested wingspans approaching 13 meters, dwarfing even the mighty Q. Northropi. In the lab, CT scans revealed intricate details, reinforced bone struts, air sacs more extensive than modern birds, crest structures unlike anything in the fossil record. Each find chipped away at old assumptions, painting a picture of a lineage more diverse and more dominant than anyone had imagined. The flight debate, reborn. The discoveries reignited old controversies. 13 meters is impossible, argued Dr. Carl Mercer at the annual Society of Vertebrate Paleontology conference, jabbing a laser pointer at a skeletal reconstruction. The square cube law doesn't bend, even for pterosaurs. Dr. Lisa Nguyen countered with wind tunnel data. Not if they were specialized for static soaring. Look at the wing loading ratios. These could have been ultra-efficient gliders, riding oceanic winds for weeks at a time. A third voice cut through the debate. "Or we're missing something fundamental," said Dr. Mark Harris, holding up a 3D printed vertebra. "What if they weren't just flyers? What if they climbed? What if they swam?" The room erupted. The crest's last secret. Back in the field, Vasquez unearthed the real showstopper, a near-complete crest fragment, its surface etched with a honeycomb of microscopic channels. "This isn't just for display or thermoregulation," Patel said, peering through a magnifying lens. "Look at these branching pathways. This was a network." Speculations ran wild. Enhanced blood flow for long-distance flight, sensory organs for detecting atmospheric pressure changes, a biological barometer guiding the giants across continents. the unanswered questions. As the sun dipped below the canyon rim, Vasquez sat beside the excavation site, the fossil cradled in her lap. The desert stretched endlessly around her, a living monument to time's relentless march. "We'll never know for sure," she admitted. "Not how they sounded, not how they mated, not what color their crests were when the sun hit them just right." Patel nodded, dusting off his hands. "But that's the point, isn't it? The mystery keeps us digging." The last shadow. Somewhere beyond the excavation lights, beyond the debates and the data, the wind stirred, a fleeting breath of the same currents that had once carried giants. And high above the Badlands, a lone turkey vulture circled, its shadow stretching long across the rocks, a whisper of the titans that had ruled before. For now, the stones held their secrets. But the sky remembered. The wind whispered through the ruins of Tenochtitlan, carrying the scent of incense and the distant murmur of priests chanting to the feathered serpent. High above, a shadow passed. Not a god, but a memory. Quetzalcoatlus. The Aztecs had never seen the creature, whose bones lay buried beneath their feet, yet they named their deity after it. Quetzalcoatl, the plumed serpent who ruled the sky. The parallels were uncanny, a being of immense power, a bridge between earth and heavens, a force both benevolent and terrible. Dragon of the New World. In the halls of the National Museum of Anthropology, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before a mural of the Aztec god, her fingers tracing the sinuous coils of its feathered body. Beside her, a skeletal reconstruction of Quetzalcoatlus Northropi loomed, its wings outstretched as if in mid-flight. "Look at the crest," she murmured, "just like the serpent's headdress in the codices. The Aztecs couldn't have known, but they felt it. The same awe, the same terror." Dr. Raj Patel adjusted his glasses, studying the juxtaposition. "Dragons in every culture, feathered serpents, winged leviathans. Maybe it's not coincidence. Maybe we're hardwired to remember giants." The bones beneath the temple. Centuries before Lawson's discovery, the Aztecs had unearthed fossils of their own, massive, unfamiliar bones embedded in the limestone near Tula. To them, these were the remains of gods, proof that Quetzalcoatl had once walked among men. "They weren't entirely wrong," Vasquez said, holding up a fragment of pterosaur femur from the museum's collection. "Just off by a few million years." The Aztecs had built temples over these bones, offering sacrifices to a creature they could only imagine. Now, those same bones sat in climate-controlled display cases, their true nature revealed, but no less wondrous. The sky demon's shadow. 70 million years earlier, Quetzalcoatlus soared over landscapes that would one day become deserts and cities. Its shadow, vast enough to darken a village, inspired no myths then, only instinctive fear in the creatures below. A herd of Alamosaurus bellowed as the azhdarchid passed, their massive forms tensing. The sky demon paid them no mind. It was hunting, its keen eyes locked on the glint of water in a distant riverbed. With a tilt of its wings, it descended, its crest slicing through the air like a blade. The motion was regal, effortless, the descent of a god who did not yet know it would be worshipped. The last echo. In the modern world, the line between myth and monster blurred. Vasquez stepped back, her gaze shifting between the mural and the fossil. "We named it after their god, but in the end, it's the same story. Something magnificent, something gone." Patel nodded. "And like the Aztecs, we're left with bones and questions." Outside, the wind stirred, carrying the scent of rain. Somewhere beyond the city, a hawk circled, its wings outstretched against the fading light. For a heartbeat, the shadow it cast was vast enough to swallow the sun. And in that moment, the sky demon lived again. The hum of the CT scanner filled the lab, a steady pulse beneath the murmur of scientists. On the monitor, the fossilized skull of Quetzalcoatlus North America materialized slice by slice, its hollow bones and intricate crest structures rendered in perfect digital clarity. Dr. Elena Vasquez leaned forward, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Look at these air sacs," she murmured, zooming in on the network of chambers within the skull. "They're more extensive than we thought, like a biological pressure system." Beside her, Dr. Mark Harris adjusted the 3D model, rotating the reconstructed crest. If these channels connected to the respiratory system, it could explain how they managed oxygen at high altitudes. Maybe they flew higher than any living bird. A new age of discovery. The Texas desert had given up its bones, but now technology was revealing secrets the rocks alone could never tell. In the corner of the lab, a graduate student assembled a life-sized wing model from 3D printed polymer bones and synthetic membrane. When completed, it would span the length of the room, a ghostly echo of the creature that once ruled Cretaceous skies. "Flight simulations are next," Vasquez said, tapping the screen where muscle attachment points glowed red. "We'll finally test the quadrupedal launch theory under real biomechanical constraints." The crest's final secret. The CT scan had uncovered something unexpected. Microscopic channels within the crest's bony structure, too fine to be seen with the naked eye. Harris traced the pathways on the monitor. "These aren't just for display or thermoregulation. Look how they branch, almost like a sensory network." Vasquez's breath caught. "You think it could detect atmospheric pressure changes, navigate using infrasound? Or something we haven't even considered," Harris admitted. "Evolution had 70 million years to experiment. We've had 70 years to study it." The unanswered questions. The lab's walls were lined with unanswered questions, scrawled on whiteboards. How did they mate? Migration patterns? Neonatal development? A holographic projection flickered to life. A speculative rendering of a Quetzalcoatlus colony nesting on seaside cliffs, their crests catching the dawn light. "We'll never know for certain," Vasquez said, watching the holographic azhdarchids launch themselves into a digital sky. "But with these tools, we can get closer than ever before." Outside, the wind stirred, the same invisible force that once carried giants. And in the quiet of the lab, the bones spoke again, not as fragments of the past, but as blueprints for the future. The desert sun blazed over the Javelina Formation as Dr. Raj Patel adjusted his sunglasses, squinting at the freshly exposed layer of sediment. His brush moved with practiced precision, revealing the delicate curve of a fossilized wing bone, another piece of the puzzle. "This isn't North America," he called to his team. "The proportions are all wrong. And look at these muscle attachment points, more robust than Lawsoni." A murmur rippled through the dig site. If confirmed, this could be evidence of a third Quetzalcoatlus species, one that pushed the boundaries of pterosaur diversity even further. The migration mystery. Back at the field lab, Patel studied the GPS data from recent fossil discoveries, Texas, New Mexico, even fragments tentatively identified in Morocco. He overlaid them on a late Cretaceous map, tracing potential migration routes with a stylus. If they crossed the Proto-Atlantic, they'd need incredible endurance, he mused. But with those air sacs and thermal soaring efficiency? His assistant, a young paleontologist named Lynn, frowned. Wouldn't juveniles struggle with that distance? Patel tapped the 3D model of a crest fragment. Unless they nested near coastlines, ride the oceanic winds, island hop. We just need to find the breeding grounds. The reproduction enigma. The biggest question loomed largest. How did creatures this massive reproduce? No Quetzalcoatlus eggs had ever been found, and their nesting behavior remained pure speculation. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice crackled over the satellite phone from the main lab. CT scans show pelvic adaptations similar to modern megabats. Maybe they gave live birth. Patel shook his head. Not with those hollow bones. The physics don't work. They must have laid eggs, but where? Lin gestured to the exposed sandstone cliffs around them. Up there, predator-free, updrafts for easy takeoff. The next frontier. As dusk painted the Badlands in gold and violet, the team packed the new fossils into protective cases. Each fragment would undergo micro-CT scanning, isotopic analysis, even AI-assisted biomechanical modeling, techniques unimaginable when Lawson first unearthed the Texas giant in 1971. Patel paused, watching a turkey vulture ride the thermals overhead. We're standing where they stood, he said quietly. Same sky, same winds. The only difference is time. Lin followed his gaze. Do you think we'll ever solve all their secrets? No, Patel admitted, but that's why we keep digging. The vulture banked, its shadow stretching long across the rocks, a fleeting echo of the titans that had once ruled these skies. And in the gathering dark, the desert whispered back. The wind howled across the Badlands, carrying with it the ghosts of giants. 70 million years had passed since Quetzalcoatlus last cast its shadow over the earth, yet its presence lingered, not just in the fossilized bones unearthed by scientists, but in the very air itself. The same thermals that once lifted its vast wings now rippled through the feathers of hawks and vultures, a whisper of the ancient currents that had carried the sky demon. In the quiet halls of the museum, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before the reconstructed skeleton of Quetzalcoatlus North America, its wings outstretched as if frozen in mid-flight. The display was a marvel of science, every hollow bone and intricate crest painstakingly pieced together from fragments scattered across time. Yet, for all their research, the creature remained an enigma, a paradox of scale and grace, power and fragility. We know so much, she murmured, tracing the edge of the fossilized beak with her gaze, and yet so little. Beside her, Dr. Raj Patel adjusted his glasses, studying the skeletal silhouette against the backdrop of a painted Cretaceous sky. That's the thing about giants, he said. They leave echoes, not answers. The last flight, remembered. The final moments of Quetzalcoatlus played out in fragments, ash choking the skies, the desperate beat of wings against air turned thick and lifeless. It had been a king of the heavens, but even kings could not outfly extinction. Yet its legacy endured. In the myths of the Aztecs, it lived on as Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent who bridged earth and sky. In the fossil record, it challenged every assumption about the limits of flight, and in the imaginations of those who studied its bones, it soared again, a phantom of the prehistoric wind, vast and untouchable. Nature's grandeur and impermanence. Vasquez stepped back, her eyes lingering on the crest, that jagged hollow crown whose purpose still sparked debate. Display, thermoregulation, a resonating chamber for calls lost to time. Maybe it was all of those things, she said softly. Maybe evolution doesn't choose. It just is. Outside, the sun dipped towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. A red-tailed hawk rode the evening thermals, its wings outstretched, in a silhouette eerily reminiscent of the creature in the museum. For a heartbeat, the past and present blurred. The final shadow. The sky demon was gone, but the sky remained. And in the quiet of the fading light, Vasquez could almost hear it. The rush of wind through ancient wings, the distant echo of a call that had once shaken the Cretaceous world. Quetzalcoatlus had ruled the heavens, and though its reign had ended, the heavens remembered. The last of the light vanished behind the hills, leaving only the silhouette of the hawk against the twilight, a fleeting shadow, a whisper of wings. And then, like the giants before it, it was gone. The wind rose over the Cretaceous plains, whispering through the dry grasses, stirring the dust into lazy spirals. The sun hung low, painting the sky in molten gold and deepening violet. A canvas stretched endlessly over the world, and against that burning horizon a shadow moved, vast, impossible, gliding on the last warm currents of the dying day. Quetzalcoatlus. Its wings, spanning 11 meters, caught the light like tattered banners. The membranes stretched taut over finger-thin bones. Each slight adjustment sent ripples through the leathery expanse, a masterwork of evolution refined over millennia. Below, the land lay still. Titanosaurs paused in their grazing, theropods lifting their heads as the shadow passed. Even the rivers seemed to hush. The azhdarchid banked, its crest slicing the air, the hollow chambers within humming faintly with the wind's passage. Scientists would argue for decades about the purpose of that crest: display, thermoregulation, sound amplification. But here, in this final moment, it was simply part of the sky, as natural as the fading light. It did not know it was the last of its kind. It did not know that far beyond the horizon, beyond the curve of the earth, a fireball streaked through the void. It knew only the wind, and the wind, for now, still answered. With a tilt of its wings, Quetzalcoatlus climbed higher, riding the thermal as it had 1,000 times before. The land below blurred into abstraction. The winding rivers, the herds of hadrosaurs, the carcasses picked clean by scavengers. All of it small, all of it fleeting. The sun dipped lower. The shadow stretched longer. And then, as the last light gilded its wings, Quetzalcoatlus turned, a slow, graceful arc, and vanished into the crimson haze. The plains fell silent. The wind sighed, and the age of giants passed into memory.